I originally was not going to be a recruiter. So initially I wanted to be an attorney, and I wanted to be either a criminal prosecutor or a criminal defense attorney. And then I wanted some experience in civil law as well as juvenile justice. So I wanted kind of a variety of different types of law to practice. And so I did not pass the bar after taking the North Carolina bar 3 different times. I did not pass. And by the time I signed up for the 4th time, I asked myself if I really wanted to be an attorney. And I realized, I literally said, Shanae, do you want to be an attorney, or is you graduating law school, is that enough for you? Because I didn't believe I was smart enough to go to law school, let alone graduate. So is that enough? And I realized that the latter part was actually enough. So I withdrew from taking the bar the 4th time. I did not want to practice law. I did not feel like I was missing anything. And I wanted to use my law degree to pivot into something different. I didn't even know what that pivot was, though. I didn't even call it a pivot. I was just like, what can I do with my law degree that they didn't really teach us in law school? We're taught to take and pass the bar. We're not taught to go pivot and do something different. And so I was like, well, what can I do that will possibly be beneficial? And I don't want to feel like my law degree has gone in vain. So I went through a series of, like everybody does, giving their resume to everyone who will look at it and asking for feedback. And I got so much great feedback from people who were not recruiters or who were not in HR. And so when I finally got to my now mentor, she kind of literally like, all right, we need to rewrite your resume. Before I even get to that, right when I was being a candidate in the knee deep of job searching, I stumbled upon what in the legal field we call doc review. And so doc review is pretty much a series of projects that you can get on if you graduated law school, or sometimes they have projects where if you graduated with a college degree. And so you just pretty much going through documents all day long. And it was easy money, but it got to a point where I was just like, this ain't doing it for me. Like I'm not a sit at the desk type of person. I gotta do something else. And so I had lost both of my contracts that I was working. I had lost both contracts within 5 days of each other, like 3 weeks before I was getting married. So I went into my wedding day unemployed, not really knowing what I was going to do. From there, I went into full-time motivational speaking, driving Lyft, and still trying to find more work. So I was literally like, I'm a published author. I wrote three books of poetry. And so I was doing poetry and selling my books to pay my car payment and driving Lyft. And so I came upon this opportunity. My husband asked me, he said, have you ever heard of Duke Temporary Service? And I said, no. So he pretty much like, I'm going to give your resume to somebody that I know. So he gave my resume to someone who gave my resume to a temp recruiter who called me like the day before he was about to leave. And so as he was vacating his role, he gave my resume to one of the temp recruiters who was still there. She called me like a couple of days later, and she presented this opportunity with me to come work for Duke. So I was like, cool, like I'm excited, like I'm hyped. And so I get there and I realize, oh snap, I'm a secretary. So this temp role that was for 6 weeks is a secretary in Duke's law school in the law clinic. So I immediately had a very humbling moment. I was like, Shanae, you are not too good for this job. And I was like, Shanae, you better not cry. You better suck it up. And I remember like holding back tears because I couldn't believe that I was a secretary in a law school with a law degree. And so I sucked it up. I did my job flawlessly. And I even got a chance to do some legal work for one of the professors because I had a law degree. I finished that assignment and went straight into, 2 weeks later, I went straight into Duke Talent Identification Program, which is Duke TIP. And so that's where I met my now mentor who ripped my resume up. She rebuilt it. And she asked me, she said, do you want to learn how to be a recruiter? And I was like, sure. I was like, I ain't got nothing else to do, so why not? So she literally taught me about the ins and outs of the candidate experience and why a candidate's urgency is really important. And she said, Shanae, the reason why I taught you the candidate experience that way is because you were a candidate. And so you understand the personal aspect and the hits that you take when you get those rejection letters and you need that yes and you need that email or that phone call. You know what that really feels like. And I knew you would fall in love with this profession. She was right. So she literally, like, she went on vacation. She threw me to the wolves in many meetings. I had to run meetings on my own as a temp. She was like, I know you can handle it. I believe in you. So I'm gonna give you these types of tasks and you're gonna succeed in it. And she made me succeed. I went from that to pivoting into my full-time role as a junior recruiter on the healthcare side of Duke. So within 2 months of her breaking my resume down and us rebuilding it, I had a full-time job as a recruiter within 2 months of that. So she taught me how to be a recruiter. I took those tips and took that to my first full-time job as a recruiter on the healthcare side of Duke. I did that for about almost 2 years. I was then, like, I had a lot of recognition. A couple of times where I had filled the most positions out of any recruiter at Duke. So, or within our department. So I was really, like, happy that I was able to gain some notoriety with the skills and tips and tricks that she had taught me. And so I got an email saying that, this company was looking for recruiters. And I was like, okay. And I got it from LinkedIn. So I hit the link. It took me to the website, and then I pivoted from healthcare into big tech. So when I got into big tech, I started to really explain the difference in why you should negotiate your salary based on total comp versus base salary. And I started to understand certain things that you don't learn in higher education and in healthcare that you do learn in tech. So I started to teach specifically the Black community why it's important to know every aspect of your salary package, because we're not taught certain things. And so I wanted to be able to give my community, access to certain information that we wouldn't otherwise have access to, because we just don't have the access. So I give a lot of people tips and tricks and spend a lot of my personal time in speaking into people to get them to, number one, know their worth and know their purpose, and then build off of that.